He had always loved the water. From a young age, he had spent hours near the lake, watching the gentle waves and imagining what it would be like to own a boat of his own. When the day finally came that he could purchase his first boat, it felt like a dream realized. It was a modest boat, nothing extravagant, but perfect for his quiet mornings and weekend adventures. He had made sure everything was in order, following the regulations to the letter. Registration was complete, safety checks were done, and he even consulted with the marina to confirm that he was complying with every rule. At first, everything went smoothly. His neighbors were friendly, and his boat was admired by those who appreciated the beauty of the water. He would wake up early, prepare his coffee, and push off into the calm waters, feeling the freedom that only the lake could offer. The boat became more than a vehicle. It was a small sanctuary. He took care of it meticulously, cleaning it after every trip, and even decorating it with small touches that reflected his personality. Then, one morning, everything changed. He was enjoying a peaceful sunrise when he noticed a car slowly driving down the street toward his property. At first, he thought it was just another neighbor, but soon he recognized the official markings on the vehicle. The heart of anxiety began to beat in his chest. The officers approached, not with greetings, but with formal statements about violations. They claimed that his boat was in violation of local rules and needed to be removed immediately. He listened, shocked, as they explained the alleged infractions. He tried to speak calmly, explaining that he had checked all rules, that he had proper permits, and that he had made sure everything was according to regulations. But the officers seemed resolute, quoting vague clauses and regulations that didn't make sense to him. The conversation ended with warnings of fines and legal consequences if the boat remained where it was. They left him standing there, stunned, as his dream seemed to teeter on the edge of being taken away. Neighbors began to gather, curious about the commotion. Some whispered among themselves, others stared openly. He could feel their judgment, even if unspoken, and it stung. How could something he had done with care and honesty suddenly be considered wrong? He walked back to his boat, touching the railing, trying to ground himself. It felt surreal, as if the lake itself had turned against him. The tranquility he once felt every morning was now replaced with tension and unease. He decided not to react impulsively. He had learned over the years that anger rarely solved problems, and emotional responses often made situations worse. Instead, he sat down, made a notebook of all the details he remembered, and began listing everything that had happened. Dates, times, statements made by the officials, observations from neighbors. Knew that if he wanted to protect his boat and his rights, he would need facts, not feelings. As the day progressed, he noticed subtle reactions from those around him. Some neighbors offered sympathetic smiles, understanding that he was being treated unfairly. Others seemed to side with the authorities without knowing the full story. The tension in the neighborhood grew, and he realized that this incident was not just about his boat. It was a reflection of how rules could be interpreted and enforced in ways that sometimes felt arbitrary. Late in the afternoon, he decided to consult with an expert. He reached out to a local attorney who specialized in property and maritime rules. The attorney agreed to look over the documentation he had and provide guidance. While waiting for the response, he didn't sit idly. He revisited every piece of paper he had regarding his boat, purchase documents, safety inspections, correspondence with the marina, and even photographs he had taken over the years showing the boat in compliance. Each document reassured him that he had done nothing wrong, but it also made him realize that proving it would require persistence and careful strategy. Evenings were the hardest. He would sit by the lake, staring at the water, reflecting on how quickly life could throw unexpected challenges. He remembered stories his grandfather had told him about standing up for what was right, about not letting fear or intimidation dictate choices. Those stories gave him strength. He knew that he couldn't simply remove the boat without questioning the accusations. That would mean surrendering to an injustice, and he was not willing to do that. He began documenting his daily observations, making notes of interactions with neighbors, the timing of patrols, and anything unusual that could support his position. Each night he wrote carefully, knowing that these notes could become crucial evidence. The process was painstaking, but it helped him feel in control amidst the uncertainty. He also started taking photographs from different angles, ensuring that everything was recorded down to the smallest detail. One afternoon, he overheard neighbors discussing the situation. Some speculated that perhaps the rules were being enforced differently for certain people, or that the officials had personal biases. While he couldn't confirm this yet, the thought made him more determined. He realized that if he wanted to protect his boat, he had to uncover the truth behind the accusations. This was no longer just a personal matter. It had become a question of fairness and justice. He reached out to a local boating community online, seeking advice from those who had faced similar challenges. Responses varied, with some sharing stories of quick resolutions, while others warned of drawn-out disputes. Despite the mixed advice, he felt encouraged. Knowing that others had navigated these waters before gave him a sense of direction. He realized that preparation, patience, documentation were his strongest tools. Days turned into weeks, and the situation showed no sign of resolving itself quickly. Each interaction with the authorities or the board felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong word, one misstep, and the consequences could be severe. Yet, through all the stress, he maintained his routine with the boat, continuing to care for it as if nothing had changed. This was not just defiance. It was a statement that his connection to the lake and his boat was not easily broken. One morning, he received a letter indicating that a formal hearing would be scheduled. The notice was precise, listing the date, time, and location. He realized that this would be the moment to present everything he had gathered, to show that the accusations were unfounded. Anxiety mixed with determination as he prepared for what was ahead. He knew that the outcome could impact not only his enjoyment of the lake, but also the principles of fairness in the community as he prepared. He reflected on the reactions of his neighbors. Some who had doubted him before were now quietly supportive. Others remained skeptical, unsure of the details. He understood that perception could be as influential as facts, but he chose to focus on what he could control: evidence, preparation, and a calm presentation. Emotions would not guide his actions. Clarity and truth would. On the night before the hearing, he walked along the shore, taking in the familiar sights and sounds of the lake. The gentle lapping of the water, the distant calls of birds, and the subtle rustle of leaves reminded him why he had fought so hard for this place in the first place. It was not merely about ownership of a boat, it was about respect, fairness, and the right to enjoy a simple pleasure without unjust interference. He returned home meticulously organizing all his notes, documents, and photographs. Each item was placed carefully, ready to be presented. He practiced explaining the situation in clear, calm language, imagining the questions he might face and the responses he would give. The preparation became almost meditative, a way to turn anxiety into action. He knew that being methodical and thorough was his best chance at success. By the time morning arrived, he felt a mixture of nervousness and readiness. He looked at his boat one last time before heading out, touching its side and remembering all the mornings and afternoons it had given him. The sunlight glimmered on the water, creating a sense of hope and continuity. He understood that the next steps would require patience, clarity, and courage. But he felt prepared to face whatever came. As he approached the meeting place, he noticed others gathered, some curious, some supportive, and some skeptical. The atmosphere was tense, but he carried himself with calm determination. The journey had begun months ago with excitement and joy, and now it had evolved into a test of resilience, preparation, and truth. He knew that how he handled this situation would define not only the fate of his boat, but also his confidence in standing up for what was right. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had followed every rule, documented every step, and approached the situation with patience and respect. He was not here to argue aggressively or provoke conflict. He was here to present facts and let the truth speak for itself. That mindset, steady and disciplined, gave him strength as he prepared to take the first steps toward resolution. Knowing that the journey ahead would require focus, courage, and unwavering commitment to justice. And so, the first chapter of this challenge came to a close, with him standing ready, determined to face the accusations, not with fear, but with clarity and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing he had done everything right. The lake awaited, calm and patient, a silent witness to the struggle for fairness and the truth that had yet to be revealed. After the initial shock of the complaint, he realized that reacting emotionally would only make the situation worse. He needed clarity and evidence. So he decided to go through all the rules, regulations, and documents that applied to his boat and its docking area. At first, it seemed overwhelming. The papers were dense, written in legal language that seemed almost designed to confuse ordinary people, but he was determined. He spent long hours reading, taking notes, and comparing every line of the rulebooks to what he had done. He discovered that some of the rules cited by the authorities were outdated or had been interpreted incorrectly in the past. Small details that seemed trivial could completely change the meaning of a clause. He had to cross-reference every statement. With official documents from the city, the marina, and even the Homeowners Association, it was meticulous work, but he found it oddly satisfying to piece together the puzzle. The more he dug, the more he realized that he had a solid position. Everything he had done, from registration to maintenance, complied with the regulations. While he focused on the paperwork, he also began documenting the physical situation. He walked along the shoreline, measuring distances, taking photographs, and making sketches. Every angle of his boat, every feature of the dock, and even the surrounding environment was recorded. He wanted to be sure that no detail was overlooked. These preparations were more than just practical. They gave him a sense of control in a situation that had initially felt chaotic and unfair. Neighbors began to notice his careful attention. Some came over to ask questions or offer help, curious about why he was going to such lengths. He explained that he needed to be thorough, not just for his own sake, but to show that the rules had to be applied fairly. A few of the neighbors shared stories of similar disputes, some resolved quickly, others dragging on for months. Hearing these experiences reinforced his determination to be prepared. He knew that a well-documented case would make a difference. He also started looking into past enforcement actions by the authorities. With some research, he found that similar complaints had been made against other boat owners, but not all were treated the same way. Some boats had been allowed to remain while others were removed. The inconsistency raised questions about why his boat was being targeted. This discovery made him realize that his case was about more than just compliance. It might reveal deeper issues in how rules were enforced. To be thorough, he reached out to local boating communities online. He shared his situation in detail, without venting anger, asking for advice and guidance. The responses were mixed. Some people encouraged him to fight the complaint with evidence. Others warned him that authorities might be stubborn and that resolution could take time. He appreciated every response and considered each suggestion carefully. This online support gave him insight into strategies others had used successfully. As he continued his investigation, he noticed patterns in the complaints against boats in the area. There seemed to be times when authorities were more active. Certain areas were scrutinized more heavily, and some owners were treated differently. He began to see that enforcement could be subjective and sometimes influenced by personal opinions or pressure from influential individuals in the community. This realization motivated him further. He wanted to ensure that fairness was upheld, not just for himself, but for anyone who might face similar issues in the future. He made a plan to organize all his findings into a clear presentation. His notes, photographs, legal references, and measurements were carefully cataloged. He knew that when the time came to confront the authorities, having everything organized would make his case stronger. It would also help him remain calm and focused during any discussions. Preparation became a kind of shield against the stress of the ongoing dispute. Meanwhile, the tension in the neighborhood persisted. Conversations were filled with speculation, some supportive, some judgmental. Despite this, he tried to maintain a positive connection with those around him, not allowing fear or tension to influence his interactions. He believed that demonstrating respect and integrity could counteract misunderstandings and build quiet support. In addition to gathering documents and observations, he reached out to professionals for guidance. A local attorney experienced in property and boating regulations reviewed his case and confirmed that he had a strong position. The attorney offered practical advice on how to present evidence, communicate effectively with the authorities, and anticipate potential objections. These discussions gave him confidence. He realized that understanding the rules deeply and presenting them clearly could turn the situation in his favor. He also spent time reflecting on the emotional impact of the dispute. It was not easy to face accusations when he had acted correctly. He felt frustration, anxiety, and occasional anger, but he learned to channel these feelings into constructive action. By documenting every step, consulting experts, and staying organized, he transformed emotional energy into a focused strategy. This approach helped him maintain clarity and resilience. Over the following days, he conducted detailed comparisons between the rules cited by the authorities and his actual practices. Each point was carefully analyzed. He noted discrepancies, ambiguities, and outdated references. He also identified areas where he could provide additional clarification or proof. The process was labor-intensive, but it strengthened his belief that the truth was on his side as part of his preparation. He rehearsed explaining his position clearly and calmly. He anticipated questions, imagined counter-arguments, and practiced responses. This mental rehearsal reduced anxiety and increased his confidence. He knew that being prepared mentally and emotionally was as important as having documents and evidence. He also observed the authorities' behavior over time. By watching their interactions with other boat owners and neighbors, he gained insight into how they enforced rules and how disputes were typically handled. This observation helped him understand potential challenges he might face and allowed him to adjust his approach accordingly. The boat remained his constant source of calm and motivation. Each time he cared for it, inspected it, or took it out onto the water, he was reminded of why he was fighting the complaint. It was not just about following rules, it was about preserving a connection to something that brought him joy and peace. This personal connection reinforced his determination and gave him a sense of purpose. He continued to communicate with supportive neighbors and online communities, sharing updates and receiving feedback. These exchanges helped him refine his strategy and maintain perspective. They reminded him that while the dispute felt personal, it was part of a larger context of fairness, rules, and community standards. As the days turned into weeks, he compiled a comprehensive dossier of evidence. It included photographs, measurements, documented communications, legal references, and expert opinions. Every detail was meticulously organized and cross-referenced. The dossier was not just a collection of papers. It was a reflection of his careful, methodical approach and his commitment to fairness. One evening, as he reviewed his dossier, he felt a sense of calm accomplishment. He had transformed a stressful, confusing situation into a structured, evidence-based approach. The path ahead would still require courage and patience, but he was ready. He had taken the time to understand the rules, document the facts, consult experts, and organize his findings. He knew that when he presented his case, he could do so with clarity and confidence. He also recognized that the dispute had taught him important lessons. Attention to detail, patience, persistence, and the importance of staying calm under pressure were skills he had strengthened. The experience had made him more aware of how rules could be interpreted and enforced. It had shown him the value of preparation and careful documentation. As the next meeting with authorities approached, he felt a quiet sense of readiness. The work he had done over the past weeks had given him control over a situation that initially felt overwhelming. He understood that presenting facts, remaining calm, and demonstrating integrity would be the key to resolving the dispute successfully. He spent the final night before the hearing reviewing his notes, rehearsing explanations, and visualizing a calm, clear presentation. The lake, his boat, and the quiet surroundings reminded him why he had embarked on this journey. It was not just about defending a vessel. It was about fairness, clarity, and standing up for what was right. With every detail carefully considered, he went to bed with a sense of purpose. The morning would bring the next chapter, where his preparation, patience, and commitment to truth would be tested. He knew the path would not be easy, but he was ready to face it, armed with evidence, clarity, and a quiet confidence that came from knowing he had done everything correctly and thoughtfully. As he continued to investigate, he began to notice patterns that were hard to ignore. Complaints against boats in the area were not always consistent, and some boat owners seemed to be treated differently. Curious and cautious, he decided to dig deeper, trying to understand why his boat had been singled out. He started talking to neighbors who had experienced similar issues, carefully listening to their stories. Some shared tales of quick resolutions, while others had been pressured into removing their boats without question. These conversations painted a picture of inconsistency and raised more questions than answers. He also looked into past records from the Homeowners Association and local enforcement. It wasn't easy. Some documents were difficult to access, and others were incomplete. But he persisted, knowing that even small details could make a difference. As he reviewed meeting minutes, emails, and notices, a pattern began to emerge. There were instances where certain boats were allowed to stay despite minor infractions, while others faced stricter scrutiny. The inconsistencies suggested that enforcement might be influenced by factors beyond simple rule following. With careful attention, he began to piece together the hidden motives behind some of the complaints. Certain individuals seemed to benefit when boats were removed or relocated. Perhaps it was about controlling access to prime docking spots, maintaining appearances for select members, or asserting influence over neighbors. He didn't jump to conclusions, but he documented every observation, every instance that seemed unusual. This meticulous approach gave him a sense of clarity and purpose. He realized that uncovering the truth required patience and careful gathering of evidence. To better understand the broader context, he connected with longtime members of the boating community. These people had witnessed disputes over the years and had insight into how rules were enforced in practice. They explained that while rules were written for fairness, enforcement could be inconsistent due to human judgment, personal preferences, or internal politics. They also shared strategies for navigating disputes, emphasizing documentation, patience, and clear communication. These insights reinforced his belief that he could handle the situation effectively if he remained calm and methodical. He began reviewing his own interactions with the authorities and the board. Notes, emails, and recordings of conversations provided evidence of their behavior and decisions. He noticed subtle cues in their language and tone that suggested assumptions had been made about him or his boat. While he could not prove intent, he recognized that the treatment he had received was not consistent with the stated rules. This awareness motivated him to strengthen his case further, ensuring that any hidden motives could be revealed with facts in parallel. He conducted additional research into local boating regulations, city policies, and homeowner association guidelines. He cross-referenced every statement made against the official documents, noting discrepancies and outdated information. Each discovery added weight to his position. He also documented previous cases where enforcement had been inconsistent, showing a pattern that supported his claim of unfair treatment. This preparation became a crucial part of his strategy, allowing him to present evidence rather than opinions. As he gathered evidence, he remained observant of his surroundings. We noticed that certain individuals who had previously been critical of his boat were now more cautious in their comments. Others seemed to watch the interactions between him and the authorities with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He realized that awareness of the larger dynamics in the neighborhood was important. By understanding not only the rules but also the people enforcing them, he could anticipate challenges and adjust his approach. He reached out to experts in maritime law and property regulations, sharing details of his case without disclosing personal biases or speculations. The experts confirmed that many of the citations against him were either misinterpreted or outdated. Their guidance gave him confidence and direction. He carefully noted their advice, planning how to present it clearly and persuasively when the time came. These professional opinions would later become a cornerstone of his argument. During this time, he also reflected on his own experiences and emotions. Facing accusations that he had followed all rules was frustrating and stressful. He felt anxiety, doubt, and moments of anger. But he learned to channel these emotions constructively, using them to fuel careful preparation rather than rash decisions. Walking along the lake, maintaining the boat, and writing detailed notes became a way to process his feelings while staying focused on the facts. he continued documenting unusual patterns in the enforcement process. For example, he noticed that notices were sometimes delivered inconsistently. Rules were applied differently depending on the boat owner, and decisions seemed influenced by personal preferences. He carefully recorded dates, times, and circumstances, ensuring that every detail was supported by evidence. By doing so, he prepared a clear record that could demonstrate possible motives behind the targeting of his boat. He also observed how other boat owners interacted with the authorities. Some complied immediately, others questioned or negotiated. He paid attention to what worked and what did not. This observation helped him refine his own approach, balancing assertiveness with diplomacy. He understood that presenting a calm, fact-based argument would be more effective than arguing emotionally, even when confronted with unfair treatment. In conversations with neighbors, he discovered additional stories that highlighted similar enforcement patterns. Some residents admitted to feeling intimidated and accepting penalties even when they had followed rules. Others expressed frustration at the perceived favoritism in rule application. These accounts reinforced his sense that his case was not isolated. It also motivated him to prepare thoroughly, knowing that exposing unfair practices could benefit the entire community, not just himself. He began organizing all the information into a structured plan. Documents, photographs, measurements, expert opinions, and personal notes were categorized and cross-referenced. He created a timeline of events, highlighting key interactions, inconsistencies, and supporting evidence. This organization gave him clarity and confidence, knowing that when he faced the authorities, he could present a logical, well-supported argument. While working on the plan, he reflected on the broader lessons of the situation. He recognized the importance of patience, observation, and meticulous preparation. He also understood that fairness often required persistence and that standing up for oneself sometimes meant challenging assumptions and hidden motives. This reflection strengthened his resolve and reinforced his commitment to presenting the truth. He also considered how to communicate effectively during the upcoming hearing. He practiced explaining his position calmly and clearly, anticipating questions and preparing responses. He focused on factual statements and evidence rather than opinions or emotions. This preparation helped him feel in control and reduced anxiety. He realized that clarity and composure would be critical in demonstrating the fairness of his case. As the days went by, he continued to gather and analyze evidence. Each discovery added weight to his argument, revealing inconsistencies in the enforcement process and possible motives behind the complaints. He documented everything carefully, ensuring that each piece of evidence could be presented clearly and convincingly. This meticulous approach gave him confidence that when the hearing arrived, he would be prepared to show the truth. He also maintained his daily routines with the boat. Caring for it, taking it out on the water, and observing the lake provided a sense of normalcy and balance amidst the stress. These moments reminded him why he was committed to defending his boat, and they strengthened his determination to see the dispute through. The connection to the lake and the boat became both motivation and refuge. Throughout this process, he remained focused on fairness and integrity. He did not let frustration or anger dictate his actions. Instead, he concentrated on gathering evidence, understanding motives, and preparing a clear presentation. He knew that a calm, factual approach would be more persuasive than an emotional one, and he remained committed to demonstrating that his actions had always been compliant and responsible. By the end of this phase, he had built a comprehensive understanding of the situation. He knew the rules, the enforcement patterns, and possible motives behind the complaints. He had documented every interaction, observed every detail, and gathered expert opinions to support his position. The picture was becoming clear, and he felt ready to face the authorities with confidence, clarity, and evidence. He also reflected on the personal growth that had come from this challenge. Patience, attention to detail, persistence, and the ability to remain calm under pressure were skills he had strengthened. He understood that standing up for what was right required careful preparation, clear thinking, and a commitment to truth. These lessons would stay with him long after the dispute was resolved. As the day of the hearing approached, continued to review his notes, practice his presentation, and anticipate questions. He felt a quiet confidence, knowing that he had done everything possible to prepare. The evidence was clear, the documentation thorough, and his understanding complete. He was ready to reveal the truth behind the accusations and confront the hidden motives that had caused the dispute. He knew that the next stage would be critical. It would require clarity, composure, and the courage to present facts while facing authority. But he felt prepared. Every hour of research, observation, and documentation had built a foundation strong enough to support his case. He understood that fairness once revealed through evidence and careful presentation could not be ignored. And so, he awaited the hearing with a sense of readiness, determined to uncover the truth and defend his rights. Knowing that his persistence and preparation had brought the day of the meeting arrived, and he felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. The morning air was crisp, and the lake sparkled in the sunlight, almost as if encouraging him to stay calm and focused. He checked his documents one last time, making sure everything was in order: photographs, measurements, notes, and expert opinions. He had rehearsed his statements, anticipated questions, and prepared responses. He knew that this was his opportunity to present the truth clearly and without emotion, and he was determined to make the most of it. When he entered the room, he noticed the authorities and board members already gathered. The atmosphere was formal, and there was a sense of tension in the air. Some neighbors were present, watching quietly from the back. He felt the weight of the moment, but reminded himself that preparation and evidence were his allies. He took a deep breath, organized his materials, and approached the front of the room. The meeting began with officials outlining their concerns about his boat. They referenced rules and regulations, pointing to alleged violations that were meant to justify penalties. He listened carefully, taking notes and making sure to understand exactly what they were claiming. He remained calm, resisting the urge to interrupt or argue impulsively. Instead, he prepared to respond point by point, relying on the evidence he had gathered over weeks. When it was his turn to speak, he presented his documents clearly and methodically. He explained how he had followed every rule, provided registration and safety inspection records, and demonstrated the boat's compliance with measurements and docking guidelines. He showed photographs taken from different angles and presented comparisons with official rule language. Each point was supported by facts, leaving little room for subjective interpretation. He also addressed inconsistencies in past enforcement actions. He shared examples of how similar complaints had been handled differently, showing that the rules had not always been applied uniformly. This was done carefully, without accusing anyone personally, but rather highlighting patterns that suggested the possibility of misunderstanding or selective enforcement. He wanted the focus to remain on fairness and compliance, not personal grievances. As he presented, he noticed subtle shifts in the room. Some board members and officials began to lean forward, paying closer attention. He could see that the clarity and thoroughness of his presentation were having an effect. Even neighbors who had been skeptical looked engaged, recognizing that the situation was more nuanced than they had imagined. The calm, factual approach he maintained contrasted with the initial tension, and it created an atmosphere where evidence could speak louder than assumptions. He carefully explained measurements, distances, and locations, showing that his boat fit within all requirements. He clarified any misunderstandings from previous notices and pointed out discrepancies in cited rules. He even referenced expert opinions, which confirmed his interpretations of the regulations. Each step built a narrative that was logical, verifiable, difficult to dispute. During the discussion, officials asked questions, some challenging and some seeking clarification. He answered each one calmly, providing additional documentation when necessary. He avoided emotional reactions, focusing instead on facts and clarity. This approach helped him maintain control of the conversation, guiding it toward resolution rather than conflict. He also addressed the concerns of neighbors who had been vocal about the situation. By explaining the rules and his compliance in simple, understandable terms, he helped them see the fairness of his case. Some nodded quietly, appreciating the clarity, while others seemed surprised at how detailed and consistent his evidence was. It became clear that his preparation had not only strengthened his position, but also educated those around him about the complexities of rule enforcement. Throughout the meeting, he maintained a composed demeanor. He understood that confidence, clarity, and calmness were as important as the evidence itself. By presenting his case with patience and respect, he created a situation where the truth could be evaluated objectively. He knew that even small gestures, like maintaining eye contact, speaking clearly, and handling documents efficiently, contributed to the credibility of his argument. As the discussion progressed, he noticed subtle acknowledgments from some of the officials. Their tones softened and questions shifted from challenging to clarifying. It was becoming apparent that the evidence he provided was reshaping perceptions. What had initially been framed as a clear violation was now understood in the context of proper compliance and careful adherence to rules. He also highlighted the broader implications of consistent enforcement. By showing that fairness mattered not just for his boat, but for all boat owners in the community. He framed the issue as one of principle rather than personal dispute. This perspective encouraged officials to consider long-term fairness and consistency in their decision-making. It was a strategic approach, ensuring that the focus remained on facts and justice. At one point, he presented a timeline of events, documenting every notice, observation, and interaction. This timeline illustrated not only his compliance, but also the inconsistencies in enforcement. It provided a clear narrative that linked evidence to specific claims, leaving little room for ambiguity. The room grew quiet as people reviewed the documentation. Absorbing the thoroughness and precision of his work, neighbors whispered among themselves, impressed by the organization and clarity of his presentation. Some admitted that they had assumed the authorities were correct without seeing the full context. His calm and methodical approach challenged those assumptions, demonstrating that evidence and preparation could overcome misconceptions and biases. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the truth was emerging through careful presentation rather than confrontation. He also anticipated potential counterarguments and addressed them proactively. By acknowledging possible objections and providing clear, evidence-based responses, he demonstrated both foresight and transparency. This approach reinforced his credibility and reassured the audience that he was presenting information honestly and objectively. He wanted the focus to remain on facts, not on emotional appeals or personal attacks. As the meeting neared its conclusion, officials and board members reviewed the documentation and discussed among themselves. He remained patient, understanding that the final decision would take time and consideration. He kept his composure, knowing that his preparation had already made a strong impression. He stayed present, observing reactions and ensuring that any final questions were addressed clearly. Finally, the head officials summarized the situation, acknowledging the thoroughness of his presentation and the clarity of his evidence. They noted the inconsistencies in previous enforcement actions and recognized that his boat complied with the rules. The tone of the room shifted from tension to respect. The focus was no longer on punishment or violation, but on fairness and accurate understanding of the regulations. Neighbors who had watched quietly nodded in approval, some offering quiet congratulations. Even those who had been skeptical seemed to accept the evidence and the fairness of the outcome. He felt a sense of relief, but also a quiet pride in having approached the situation methodically, respectfully, and patiently. The process had tested his resilience and focus, and it had reinforced the importance of preparation, evidence, and clear communication. As he left the meeting, he reflected on the experience. The confrontation had been challenging, but it had also been an opportunity to demonstrate integrity and clarity. He had turned a stressful, potentially unfair situation into a lesson in patience, preparation, and effective communication. He realized that standing up for what was right often required careful planning, calmness, and the courage to present evidence in a way that could not be ignored.